Okay, all right, let's go ahead and find a seat, ideally, clustered-ish towards the front. Glad everyone is here. So we missed our meeting last week for those of you who normally get to come. And we've got a couple of goals here today. The main two things we want to talk about are Sikkim coming up and how we handle invitations to that. And then we're going to do our Bible study on 1 Timothy chapter 4. So we've been working our way through 1 Timothy all of this year. And conveniently, we have 3 meetings, I think, including today, and 3 chapters left. So we will make as much progress as we can. Before I launch in talking about Sikkim, though, I did want to talk briefly about pizza theology because it's racing up, and we lost a 1 week of the Grove to announce it right here at the beginning. So it is coming up on February 22nd, and it's going to be at First Baptist Plano, like we've done the last couple of Februaries. This time, our topic is how to think like a Christian. And so this is one, who's gotten to sit through this one before? Anyone? A couple in the back? Yeah. This is one that we sort of cycle back to every 4 or 5 years and try to give most students in our ministry the opportunity to go to. It's something that honestly, like when I finally heard a class on this and we built some of the material, that we use from this class, I mean, I was probably in my mid 30s and I was like, where has this been all my life? Like no one, I think I spent so much of my life when I thought about thinking like a Christian, it was like find topic name, do a search in the Bible to see if that word shows up in the Bible. If it does, what do those verses say? And then often the things that were most relevant to me or that I was trying to think through, there was no verse in the Bible about it, or I didn't know what to say. And so then it's kind of like, all right, I guess we're kind of left to our own devices. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think we have a lot of resources that God has given us about how to think through things beyond just, do I have a Bible verse I can memorize on the topic? But obviously the Bible is a huge part of that, and we'll spend a good chunk that night talking about what the Bible is and how we bring it to bear. So Garrett and I will be teaching that, and it is one that students tend to really enjoy and really engage with, and so that's kind of the plan coming up. So as you're talking about this, it's sort of about taking that next leap, not just like, okay, on theoretical issues, how does a Christian think about ICE and immigration? It's like, yeah, we want to be able to do that, but not just so we can sort of like post online, but so that I can start figuring out how do I live my life in all these different kinds of decisions that I face every day. How do I make decisions about what job I should take when I've got 2 different offers? Because sometimes we want to just like pray really hard until we have a really strong feeling of which one we should do. And every once in a while that works out. But I can tell you, like when I did the Ask Unc thing at camp just a few weeks ago, the majority of the people that I had one-on-ones with, the question was that, except it didn't work out that when they prayed, they had a strong feeling. And then they're this like, okay, how do I think through these decisions? And so we face all these kinds of decisions all of the time. And that's sort of what we're going to be talking about. So I think it really is foundational to all the other stuff we do. In fact, one of the things I tell people when I talk about what we're trying to do over a 4-year period with a student that's a part of our community is teach you how to think like a Christian. You're here at university to learn how to think like an engineer, or how to think like a psychologist, or how to think like a scientist, or whatever that is, to learn your field. But I think you can also be here to learn how to think like a Jesus follower, and not just think like one who's 12 or 13, but think like one who's a college educated mid-20s person. And then hopefully that's something you can build on. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing that day. Parts of it will be, more theoretical. Parts of it will be more practical. But I think it will all be laying a foundation of stuff that you can use and discuss. So any questions about pizza theology and what we're doing there? I would just kind of remind you that, like everything, one-on-one is how it's done. We've talked about this before. One of our axioms is that your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. They're always kind of two sides of the same coin. And so I'll just remind us, especially since we've kind of been away for nearly 2 months, that one-on-one ministry is sort of our greatest strength, and it also becomes our greatest weakness, which means that an announcement does almost nothing to get our community anywhere. Like, what gets people places is that the people that they are in relationships with talk to them about it. And so we're just not an announcement-driven community. We are a relationship-driven community. And so getting people to stuff like this, it takes a lot of conversations and talking. And that's exactly, you're always choosing a strength-weakness set, right? I would much rather be a relationship strength-weakness set than an announcement strength-weakness set. That's not what we're going for, but we just have to be realistic. So as we're heading into this, and as we think about, wow, that's less than 3 weeks away now, it's 3 weeks from yesterday, we got to start having those conversations and helping people, get that plan going. Okay, the second thing I want to talk about is SICM. And talk about this. SICM, Student Institute of Campus Ministry. How many of you have been to that? Yeah, like a lot of people. This has, over the past 20 plus years, been our number one sort of vanguard of leadership development in our ministry. With that said, there's never been a one-to-one. It's never been that everyone who went to SICM leads core or has some leadership role in our ministry. And it's never been that people who didn't go don't lead. We've always had a lot of that. But generally, when I ask our leader team, like, who's been, you're going to get 90% of the hands, because it is a place not just for training, but also for catching the vision, developing, all of that. So, we take going to SICM very seriously. It's also something, if you haven't been, SICM is a conference up in Washington State, very kind of tippy-top northwest corner of the continental US. And so really close to the Canadian border, right on the water. And we have this relationship up there, and they offer this conference every year, and they actually do it twice. And once they do it in June when they're out of school and the other people in that region of the world are out of school, and once they do it in May, and it's mostly just for us. And so we go, last year I think we took about 150 people from across our campuses, and the conference was like 165 or something like that. I mean, we are the bulk of it. And the one year we didn't go in May, they didn't do it in May. So they do it kind of for us, and it's the same material every year. So it really is kind of a one-time thing for most people. Certainly some of our pastors have gone multiple times, but most students are going to get to go one time, and they're going to get that experience. I do think it's something that's valuable, certainly beyond just college. I was sharing with a couple of students a few days ago that I had one of our alums who's probably in his upper 30s now, like I bet he's 38, 39, call me a few months ago, and he was like, what I really feel like I need, and what I feel like my church needs, is like SICM for adults. He's like, it was just that thing where we go and we take days and we think about, what does it really mean to follow Jesus? What does it mean to share our faith? What does it mean to worship? What does it mean to have an inner life with God? All these kinds of things. He's like, no church I've ever been in does anything like that. It's just too big of a thing. We're on a topic or a thing. And I also have regularly some of our older alumni tell me that they get back out their SICM binder and sort through the resources and read back over things, when they're prepping things. So I don't think it's just for campus ministry, but it is targeted first and foremost at campus ministry. And so we use this to really develop our next generation leaders, to help them catch a vision for this, and to help get them some skills that we sort of walk on campus in the fall ready for fall. So with that said, the way we've done this over the years is that we have our core leaders do the invitations for Sikkim. They do that in concert with your coach, your pastoral coach who's doing that. Will sort of talk through that, approve that, help you think through that, because we do want it to be consistent to some degree, not just across UTD, but also across all of our campuses, because we can't take 500 people, even if 500 people were interested. And we are trying to kind of keep a certain, we want to take a certain people who are really ready to receive that teaching and excited to receive that teaching. I know a number of years ago during COVID, they weren't able to host Blue State, far away. So we did our own Sikkim down here, and we did it at a camp. And we were like, oh, we don't have these size restrictions. We're not flying people anywhere. We don't have to come up with enough beds. The camp has plenty of beds. We'll just invite more people. And one of our biggest regrets from that year was that we invited more people, because I think a part of the, not that any of them were bad, but I think a part of the experience is like, I'm taking a week out of my life to go be not just with everyone from my core, but with the people in my cohort who are the most serious about God, the most serious about learning and growing in their faith. And that shapes the whole experience for everyone, that I kind of get to be there, and we sort of, I picture sometimes it's like if we spend our year trying to get our ministry to like boiling point, and we're boiling, it's like we want to only pour in boiling water. We don't want to pour in some lukewarm water in that, because it's going to drop the temp real fast, right? And so we're trying to take, like, these are the people who are really on fire, who are excited, who are heated up, and then we're going to go spend a week together kind of resting in that and experiencing that. So it's not about saying people that we don't invite are bad, but we are kind of like, oh, I don't think they're ready. I don't think this will give them the best experience. I've also found over the years that sometimes we've tried to really sell it, because it is expensive. It's expensive in time, it's expensive in money, and it's expensive just in attention. It's like, okay, I'm going to go sit, for 5-6 days, all day long in classes. And I'm like, if people don't want to do that, like, they shouldn't go. It's like, and we're like, oh, it's so fun. It's so fun. It's the funnest thing you've ever done. And like, it's like, yeah, it was really fun for you because you were passionate about learning and growing in your faith. And it was fun to sit and learn that all day long. But if someone's not there, they're going to be like, when's the fun? Like, and they feel hoodwinked into it. They're not having a great time. And then you're sitting there, or their friends are like, what's wrong? The whole time. So we really don't want to oversell it in that way. I do think it's fun. It's fun to travel with friends. It's fun to travel with peers. If you've never gotten to go on a trip with peers instead of your family or something, that's definitely a different experience. We'll take some sightseeing days in the Pacific Northwest, get to see Seattle, some things like that. But again, that's kind of the first couple days. And then the rest of it is, we're serious. We're talking about God. We're spending time worshiping and doing all that stuff. And that's what we're there for. So generally, the way we've approached this is that we want the core leaders to look at the people in their core who haven't been to Sikkim before and ask the question, who do we think could be a core leader next year? Let me make some caveats. What I mean by that is, like, we think this person is capable and in a place in terms of their character and stuff to do that. Not, I think that they have too busy of a schedule and they would probably say no if I asked. I'm like, that is really irrelevant to me, because I get it. Like, people are gonna have to make their own decisions, but a lot can happen between, January, February, and August in terms of people's life plans and stuff. And those are their decisions to make. But I'm trying to project out in terms of their character, their relationality, how serious they are about God. Do I think they would be someone we would be interested in giving that invitation to? And then there's other things that are tricky because we are limiting numbers. So sometimes it's like, oh, this person's transferring or this person's graduating or and like, yeah, we will take some of that into account, but it's really not our main question. Our main question is one of their own sort of heart and character and where they're at. And to do that, we use, and some of you have already done this with your Corfa coach, but Paul's going to talk about it. We use the FAITH acronym. And what I want to go over this one more time, and I may add some comments as we go, because this is just, it really is a helpful tool. We use this even when we think about hiring, not just this one, but others, because too often hiring or selecting people for leadership roles is sort of this like gut feeling, which often boils down to who do I like? Who do I kind of get along with? Who fits me? And so we can easily draw people in that we click with really well, but maybe their character isn't at that place. And we can easily exclude people whose character is really right, but I don't really click with them. And so we use the FAITH acronym to try to move us a little bit more into the like objective realm of how do I actually, think through this in a structured, purposeful way. What am I really looking for? So Paul's going to talk about what those 5 things are, and then we'll go from there.
So yeah, as Brandon said, this is a FAITH acronym. Because it spells out faith. And this is a way to assess people for leadership, not criticize them. I think it is easy to kind of think about as people, are how they fit into each of these categories or character traits, and you get really critical of just where they're at and where you want them to be. I myself can be like that, and then quickly disregard someone from even being someone who has leadership potential. But I think if you consider these as just places we all can grow and places people in your core can grow in, then it becomes easier to stay out of that just critical mindset of just saying yes or no on someone immediately. But sorry, I won't breathe that loud. That's let me make this go further down, because I talk loud anyway. I feel like you could hear me. So I usually go through these with my COFA, either just the 2 of us, or usually in 2-on-1. Your peer team coach is going to want to know specifically where the people in your core line up with each of these. But the first one is faithful. And I'll write big too, if you can read it. And by faithful, we mean, are they faithful with their commitments that they make? Do they show up? When they show up, are they present? Like we've talked about before at the beginning of core, Christians were people that make promises and keep promises. And so if your core member is constantly breaking their promises or just not super committed to being present, then I would flag the F for faithful. The A stands for available. And by available, I don't necessarily mean, does this person have 12 free hours each day and are just sitting on their phone scrolling? A lot of us do have some free time, but there are plenty of us, especially in this room, who may have busier schedules that are filled with classes, other extracurriculars, but it's often the people with the most commitments that are the most available, because they know how to make a schedule and how to control that schedule and not let that schedule control them. And so, yeah, can this person make time for people and be able to prioritize in their own life where that time needs to go? So that's the available. The I stands for initiative, initiating, somewhere in there. I don't know what the correct verb tense would be. We're right, initiating, initiative, somewhere in there. To me, this is one of the most important. I say one of, we'll get to the H at the end. But leaders are people who make things happen. And often in forming relationships with people, someone has to take that first step that can feel more vulnerable to step out and make the first move, quote unquote, or just be willing to try something new. And that just takes a level of being willing to initiate. So it's really hard to get the wheel turning in an organization if it's filled with people who don't really have that ability or that want to initiate with others. I think in core, one way that I see this making a really big difference, especially going into the spring semester, is you may have some new people in your core. And you've been going this whole semester, getting to know the same people, building up these close relationships, and your core is just getting tighter and tighter, and that feels great. But then suddenly there's a new person who is invited in at the start of the semester, and it's going to be, just trying to put yourself in that new person's shoes. It's not a room of a bunch of people who don't know each other. It's a room of 8 to 12 people who have spent several months together every week, sometimes every day. And you're now trying to figure out, or that new person is trying to figure out, where do I fall in this? And so it takes someone who's willing to initiate and go across that line, or that quote unquote dividing line in core, to welcome them in. And I think that's something that you should keep in mind in your own cores going into this semester. But you can also encourage people that you want to grow in their ability to initiate, to say, hey, I think I've seen there's this new friend in core. I would love if you could grab their number and hang out with them this week, or include them in your hangout this week. And that can make a really big difference in how included and welcome they feel. The T stands for teachable. It comes from being teachable. Really isn't, does this person have all the answers and are they already smart? It's, is this person humble, willing to learn, excited to learn? One of the hardest things for me coming out of my chemistry degree, where asking questions was seen as not knowing, or you didn't do the homework, or you didn't do the reading, and so you didn't want to ask questions in class. It was hard for me to learn kind of just the art of asking questions in my apprenticeship classes of, am I willing to show that I don't know the information and I want to learn? And so, yeah, is just this person wanting to look more like Jesus and learn more about Jesus, not just intellectually, but maybe character-wise? Are they willing to accept that there's places for them to grow and be teachable when you point them out? But it all comes from a place of humility, not pride. This last one is very important. It's just heart for God and others. And this is one Brandon had to remind me on when we went through this acronym ourselves, is there could be someone who fits all of these. They show up to everything. You're super excited about them, but they haven't made a commitment to Jesus, right? And Jesus isn't Lord of their life. That's really important. And if this is a question that you have on someone in your core, and if they have a heart for God, then that's a conversation that you need to go have. You just need to go ask, because that's the whole point of what we're doing. That's the whole point of what SICM is for. So I've used this acronym, kind of closing, I've used this acronym in different ways. Just, it could be Felipe and I talking about guys in our core, and then one of us know that we need to go have a conversation to see, like, okay, where are they in their commitment to Jesus? Have they even made a schedule? Is that a place that we can speak into and help build their first schedule so they're more available? But sometimes I've had someone come up to me and ask me about SICM and if they were going to be invited. And I would be prepared for that. Hopefully, you would have already gone through these with people in your core. And I've, especially if they're a returner, a sophomore or a junior, I've written this out with them. And I've said, yeah, this isn't like a secret acronym we keep that only this room can know about. But I've written this out with them and I've said, this is what we're looking for generally. And I've seen that you are not very available, or I've seen just here's some questions I have about how you respond in teachable moments. And then that can just open the door for a conversation in the moment. They don't have to be perfect in everything, but I think just assessing, are there blind spots or are there places that they can grow? And this is just a good acronym to keep in mind as you're doing that. Any questions? I may have been kind of quick. Yeah? Can I capitalize the I? That is capitalized in my brain. But your peer team coach knows all of this more than me, and they can help you.
Yeah. I've used this, a lot over the years. Yeah, just going over it. I wouldn't mind explaining it at Friday night if it wasn't just a time thing. But it often has been, especially when it comes to like teachability, sometimes when people ask me that question, and sometimes people have asked me like, hey, like I heard these other people got invited to Sikkim. And I would say, as we go into these invitations, we need to be really careful. Like, this is not something that I tend to, we're not keeping a secret, but we also just want to be sensitive to, like, not everyone gets this opportunity. We're not looking down on people that don't have this opportunity, and talking to people about how to talk about it. I often would tell the guys in my core, like, hey, I'm inviting you to this, but we're not inviting everyone. So it might be wise, like, if you wonder if someone else is invited, if you check with me instead of asking them to their, it's just, you can kind of be wise, or asking in a big group, who all of you have been invited, that kind of thing. And also the invites aren't going out at the exact moment. There's not like an email that goes out. You guys are going to do those invitations, and I'll talk about that in a second. But sometimes I've missed people. Historically, the people we've missed are people that like move core at the semester. So really be conscious of that. If you have someone that was regular, a big part of your core last semester and can't come this semester, their new core leaders are probably not going to have any of this information about them. So they're really on your list to make sure. But we've dropped the ball there some. And if we drop the ball, come talk to us, that kind of thing. But going over this with people and saying, like, here's what I've observed. Like, it just, you're not very consistent. And I'm just curious to see how they respond to that. Sometimes they have information that I didn't have, because sometimes I missed things, but I didn't communicate well why or what was going on. Sometimes I can see a teachability thing. Like, are they instantly mad and defensive if I don't think they're wonderful and perfect? Or is it like, oh, well, tell me, here, how would you handle it? Sometimes I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so shocked by how teachable this person was. I wish I'd had this conversation 6 months ago. I think it would have been really helpful. So I'll use this again, no secrets here. And I give you this obviously for focus. This is how we think about, sort of leading core. But again, a lot of you are going to be in positions as you move through life where you're selecting people and trying to kind of figure out, how do we do that in a way that's fair and that really gets at what's important? One principle that I use in leadership across the board is, it's better to imperfectly measure the right things than it is to perfectly measure the wrong things. I said that to Marty Solomon. He goes, I'm stealing that. I was like, well, I stole it from someone else. I just don't know who. But it really is this, like, these are not perfectly measurable things, right? They're not. It would be way easier to measure, like, percentage of time they attended core, number of FOJ lessons they've gotten through. Like, those things are quantifiable and easy, but they don't really get us the right information, right? How do I really measure heart for God? Well, sometimes my best I can do is like ask. It's like, I think my big question with you is like, because I just, you're quiet and core and you're quiet and like, do you really love God? Do you really love other people? Honestly, most people are not going to just lie to you. Like it would be the rare most of the time they're just going to be like, yeah, well, I'm this or that. And here's where I'm at. Or like, no, I'm serious about God. And I'm like, okay. Like, so sometimes I think we are afraid often to just like ask the question is one of our axioms. And it really is amazing. Most Christian people are not here to like deceive me about the faith acronym. You know what I mean? So it's like, if I don't know something, my best step is usually to have a conversation about it and move into that. And then I also think here's another, I don't think we've gone over this year, but this is another tool that I use a lot. Have we talked about Johari's window this semester, this school year? I don't think so. I try to teach this every year because I think it's a really helpful tool, and I'll give it to you now. It's called the Johari window. And it's because like the two guys that invented it were like Johnson and Harrison or something, and they mixed their names. So it's not like foreign. I don't know who Johari is, but So anyway, that's what it's named for. It's just something that gets used in the business world and psychology, different things. But the idea is that if this box sort of represents everything there is to know about me, then we can break it down in a couple of different ways. On one side, we can say things that others know, and then things down here that others don't know about me. So everything's contained in that. And on the other axis, we're going to say things that I know and things that I don't know. And that creates 4 quadrants. And this is a great like napkin thing in coaching conversations. I've used this sitting and counseling one-on-one. I've used this in business, coaching conversations, things like that. I've used this in my core at different times. But so what you start finding is like things that others know and don't know, we call the open part of the window. And you can easily like Google image search this and find, people will sometimes call them slightly different things, but this is easily findable. So in other words, this is open information. Maybe not every human in the world knows it, but like generally people know this stuff about me. Like I'm married to Sarah. You may not have known my wife's name, but a lot of people in this room know, it's not a secret. I know that my wife's name is Sarah, right? It's part of the open window here. And then there are going to always be things that I know about myself, my own life, that other people don't know. And so the idea here is that this is sort of the closed or the private part of the window. And everyone has some sort of private life, right? There's actually going to be things that others don't know and I don't know. There's always sort of an unknown thing. And it doesn't make that information unimportant. I could have, a grapefruit-sized brain tumor. And if I have no symptoms yet, you don't know it, I don't know it. It doesn't mean it can't deeply affect all of us a month from now, but it's just we don't know it, right? There's always going to be some part of that there are things we don't know. But the one that I've worked with a lot with people is this last thing. There are things always that other people know that I don't know about myself. This is what we call a blind spot. That could be as simple as, when Paul was handing off the mic to me, he stuck a kick me sign on my back. And you guys see it every time I turn around and giggle, but I don't know that, right? I have a blind spot. We all have this stuff. We have this stuff socially, the way that we're perceived, and so we tell these stories. We had a conflict. It's like, well, I was really nice and gentle and I didn't raise my voice once, and everyone listening is like, I bet, it's like, I know what it sounds like when you don't raise your voice, or it's like we all have this stuff. The way we perceive ourselves can be off kilter from reality, off kilter from what other people are able to see. It's why it makes it so awkward to listen to a recording of ourselves. You're like, I sound like that, right? Everyone else knows you sound like that. but you don't realize that. And so sometimes this can be helpful. It's like, yeah, we all have that. And so I use this in ministry in different ways. One, I've found that just drawing this and explaining this sometimes can open up. It's like, and so I want to talk to you about something that I think might be in your blind spot. And I'm not doing that to be mean to them. I'm doing that like, I would rather know if I have a kick me sign on my back and everyone's laughing at me, right? That's helpful information to me. In other words, I'm moving things from my blind spot into the open part of the window. I'm opening that section up. I don't want to enlarge someone's blind spot. I want to reduce someone's blind spot. And sometimes when I've explained that and kind of put it in this terms, people are like, okay, yeah, I realize. So it's like, I'm not saying this is, right or wrong, or you have to make a change. I'm just going to tell you what other people see that you don't see. And then you can do with it what you will. And I've found that to be helpful in getting people to listen. I've also found a lot of times, it's not bad to have a private part of our window, but some people, their private, part of the window, their closed part is huge, and the open part is this big. I had kind of a counselor mentor guy many years ago. We were talking, and he drew this thing. He was like, Venn diagram. And he was like, Brandon, if this is what goes on in your head, and this is what the world sees, he's like, notice how tiny this little overlap is, And he's like, these circles don't need to be perfectly overlapped. He's like, but they probably do need to move closer together. And that was really helpful advice to me. And he started giving me some practical ways of moving some of my like interior thinking world out. And we would talk about like, who could I share? I mean, this was the most awkward thing that I think I've ever done, but it was really good for me. He was like, this week, he's like, I only want you to pray out loud. He's like, pray about all the same things, but no one has to be around. You can do it alone. You can hide as much, it's like, that was the worst experience of my life, right? It was like trying to but it was powerful to actually articulate things, because articulating things in my head and articulating things out loud are two different experiences. And it brought it out into the real world, and it prepared me to be able to share some of those things with friends and stuff, because I'd said them out loud before. I'd figured out how to say it out loud. So again, this is where I could be like, yeah, we need to kind of move some things from this over to here. Who are people in your life that you think are trustworthy? Who are people that you think So again, I'll use this tool sometimes just in my one-on-one ministry of kind of providing wise counsel to people to help them understand. Or sometimes it's this. It's like they're having weird medical symptoms. And so often we're afraid of what might be in the unknown, so we won't check. Have you ever not checked your grades for a couple of days? Right? We all live this way. And so again, it's like there are things that are in this unknown thing that don't have to stay there. And facts are our friends, right? Facts are just reality. We can use them to make decisions. And so there's all sorts of things that we may need to move here. Or there have also been times where I'm like, I think you're putting too much here. Not in general. It's like, but everyone doesn't need to know all of your business, right? Or this specific person, I don't think it's helpful to them, right? Paul says in Ephesians 4, let nothing unwholesome come out of your mouth, only what's useful for building up others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who are listening. So it's not just about like, as long as what I'm saying is the truth, it's okay for me to tell it to anyone. It's like, no, I've got to be wise. And so there may be things that, I'm dominating core with, the nitty gritty details of my, the grossest part of my life. And it's like, no, that would be more appropriate for a couple of wiser people. Or maybe this thing that you're wanting to talk about with a bunch of 22-year-olds would be better handled with someone in their 30s or 40s who's like equipped to help you process this at that level. So again, it's just a tool to kind of like talk and like, okay, where should things be? What would be healthy? And I just think people have historically responded really well because it's simple. I can kind of wrap my brain around it pretty quickly, and kind of it puts me in more of a a logical frame of mind. So any questions about any of this before we move on? I'm just that good. Yeah, Jason.
I see how this is helpful. How would you use this in a conversation or like start a conversation around your
Around what?
around like the window? Like,
Uh-huh.
I just don't really see. Yeah.
No, I see that. I see that. And some of this, I promise you, it will feel more awkward until you've done it once or twice, because it's just, when do you do this, right? Like you have to kind of do this. And so sometimes I'm like, again, it depends on what the conversation is. Am I bringing this up? Like I want to talk to them about the lack of teachability that I see in them, because this is another way I use the faith acronym, is when I think about leading, discipling, mentoring people second semester, maybe I'm not going to invite them to SICM, but this has helped me to identify maybe one or two things. I'm like, man, but if I could help them in this area, I think it could really help them, and so I can, sit down and be like, maybe I get one-on-one time with Joe. I'm like, Joe, I wanted to talk to you about something this week, because I was thinking about you this week. I've been praying for you, and I was just thinking about areas that I think could be like the next frontier of you growing in Christ. And I wanted to share with you this diagram that I think has been helpful to me, and that I think could be helpful for our conversation. So let me draw this out and explain kind of how it works. Okay, when I think about you, I'm thinking, I think there's something here in your blind spot that, and again, we've all got a blind spot. I might often tell a story of a time I learned something in my blind spot, that it's like, I'm not someone that doesn't have a blind spot, and so if you can think of a good story of something someone shared with me, and I was so, it's like, yeah, it stung a little bit at the moment, but it was really helpful. I'm glad I knew, that kind of thing. And I think this might be something like that, or maybe perfectly well what's going on, and then I can just kind of use it to lead in. So that's kind of how I would handle it, and just keep it pretty light most of the time, not like, Joe, rebuke time. I don't know what, it's like, sometimes I think we bring in so much nervous energy to conversations that doesn't need to be there. One of the best pieces of advice I remember I got from my dad a bunch of years ago. I had a guy in my ministry, and we had a number of difficult conversations over the course of months. And I was going to have another kind of difficult conversation with him. And I was just amped, and I had called my dad, and I was, because he was kind of my ministry mentor at the time, and still to some degree, but definitely then I was like, okay, this conversation, I need to talk to him. And he was giving me advice, and he goes, but my number one, he's like, gave me a lot of things to say. He's like, but my number one piece of advice is, he's like, I can tell you have already decided this conversation is not going to go well, and you are just amped up and ready. He's like, just go in assuming it's going to go great, and you're going to bring a very different energy and it will be much more likely to go great. And I was like, okay. And I was meeting this guy at Brahms there, straight up Waterview, and I was like, I think I was maybe even already in the parking lot talking to my dad, I was like, okay, yeah, go in, it's just going to be fine. And we had the best conversation we'd had in over a year. It was this young staff guy, and it just went great. And I think it really was because I didn't bring this like intensity to it. So I would do a lot of that. I'm like, to me, I think the longer I've done all of this, the more I'm like, take it or leave it. Like, if you don't think it's valuable, no skin off my back, it's your life. You want a big old blind spot, go for it, right? I'll offer you an opportunity, but it doesn't really reflect on me if you're not interested in it. Because I think that's how Jesus ultimately ministered. He told people the truth, but he didn't shove it down their throats. If they weren't very interested in it, they could go somewhere else, or they didn't listen. I mean, look at how, or they could stay. I mean, how many times did he like have tough conversations with his disciples, but it didn't like resolve and fix everything immediately. Sometimes it was like the resolve was years away, but he said what he needed to say and he moved on. And their relationship stayed intact. It wasn't like, fix it or else, right? But But Jesus was kind of on the move, and it was more like, come with me or else we won't have this ongoing relationship. So they got to keep choosing to keep engaging. And they didn't keep engaging because he tickled their ears and told them how wonderful they were. I mean, how many compliments do you remember Jesus paying his disciples in any of the four gospels, right? He just didn't seem to do that much. But they were willing to keep going and keep listening. So I don't know. That's a great question, though. But does that help? Yeah. I'm just like, that's kind of how I would do it. Other questions? Yeah.
Is it like, how would you go about asking someone else to make a Johari's window on you?
Well, I mean, I've done that before too. Sometimes, I don't know that I would say a Johari window as much as I would ask people this. I'd be like, hey, I really, if they're in this room, you can have a conversation or send an email. I've done this, before. I pick 4, 5, 6 people that I really trust and see me and be like, hey, I just want you to know, like, it would be really helpful to me if you would tell me anything that you think I'm like unaware of or thinking wrongly about that would be helpful to me. I want to grow. I want to be my best. I want to be the best friend that I can be. I want to, so I'm just telling you I'm open. But again, all I can do is invite that. I can't demand that. Some people aren't going to want to do that because they don't have anything. Some people aren't going to want to do that because they don't want to risk the relational friction. But if they choose to do that, that's a gift. And I can ask for gifts, but I can't demand gifts. And so, but yeah, I think it can be a great thing. But I would pick people that are closer to me that see, that there's a mutual trust built and that kind of thing. In business, a lot of times they'll do assessments. Have you heard of like a 360 assessment? The idea is that you go 360 degrees around. So a lot of times it'll work like, here's an assessment that I take, or that we're doing on Mandy. And so Mandy would take that assessment about herself, and then some people who report to her would take the exact same assessment about her, and some of her peers in the organization would take some of the exact same assessment, and her supervisor. And then we could kind of compare those different things and sort of see, all right, like in each area, is Mandy like, oh, Mandy thinks she's really good at this and no one else thinks she's good at that, or Mandy thinks she's really bad at that and no one else thinks she's bad at that. Or whatever that is, that it can be a way of doing that. So organizations use the same principle to try to see, all right, how accurate is my self-perception in those areas? Yeah. Anything else? Well, moving forward on this SICM invitation thing, we have the SICM invites or info sessions. We'll send this out in the Slack, but they're coming up like February 10th. So you need to, before you invite anyone to the info session, you need to discuss all of this with your Corfa coach and make sure that you have the go-ahead to invite that person. And then you'll invite them and you can tell them about SICM to whatever degree. Also, if you're leading core this year and you haven't been, you are invited. That's just always been our policy. Even if you're graduating, if you would like to go, you're more than welcome to go. But other than that, you need kind of an invitation to one of those sessions. So there's one before the Grove on Friday the 10th, and then one I think will be online, I think maybe that following Monday night. Or maybe it's a week. No, what are they? Is it not the 10th? What is it? The 13th, and then the 16th, 13th and 16th, or something like that. So they're coming up. And then they'll have like 3 or 4 weeks to make sense. SICM is a little over $1,000. There's a couple of discounts, and then and that covers all the different pieces. It's basically like a 10-day trip. And we'll help people fundraise. So again, I wouldn't not invite people you're like, they'll never be able to pay for it. They can decide. Anyone that's ever been willing to do what we've asked to do, to fundraise and do that stuff, we've always come up with the money for them to do it. The only people that haven't gone because of money is like, I won't do any of that. It's like, if you want to pay for me a 10-day trip and I don't have to do any work, I'll go. Otherwise, I'm like, no, that's not the kind of like hunger and heart that we're really looking for this particular experience. So it's different in that way than like winter retreat, where we're kind of like, it's a pretty low bar for us to pay for you. It's just a bigger deal. So yeah. Make sure I didn't forget anything else I wanted to say about that. So yeah, I think that's anything any of the other pastors want to add about how to do these invites or anything? Great. Okay, so here's what we're going to do for the second half. We're going to go to 1 Timothy 4, but what I want you to do is actually start back in 1 Timothy 3:14. All right, here. So just so we can kind of keep an eye on where we're coming from, context. And I would like you with the person next to you, one or two people, read aloud, start in 1 Timothy 3:14, read all the way through chapter 4. Just make sure you're all working from the same version so that you can... 1 Timothy 3:14 through all of chapter 4. And then, so read, and then I'll just start by kind of taking questions of like, what's standing out to you? What questions do you have? That kind of thing. Go for it.